According to the information released by his office, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo expected to earn around $5.1 million from the pandemic book deal. The book, American Crisis Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic, has underperformed amidst ongoing scandals surrounding the governor, with only 50,000 hard copies sold since its release in October.
Joining us now to discuss is Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard, and Democratic strategist Roger Fisk. Great to see both of you guys.
Good to see you guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Roger, what do you think about this? This is a pretty big payday for a guy who's now plagued by multiple scandals. And by the way, one of those scandals is some indications that he used his staff to help write this book.
Good morning, first off, and I love being on with Rachel, so thank you for having me. You would think after the mission accomplished incident with President Bush that people would be very, very reluctant to spike the football in a policy context. And I mean that very honestly. I actually kind of backed my way into politics and actually started out more in policy. And you never know when these things are actually over, right? They can always come back around and bite you in some different way. Like I used to work on kind of Medicare reimbursement formulas and things like that. And there's just no finite end. So the idea, and I know we touched on this months ago, but the idea that he would kind of be the self-celebrating, chest-thumping halfway through, we might not even be halfway through right now, for all we know in this whole thing. So I think it's getting way ahead of himself. And I can't believe that someone in his circle didn't sit him down and say, the optics of this are off. And we just can't think that we can't assume that we've reached the finish line of this whole thing. I think it's very unwise.
Yeah, and Rachel, not only did his staff not sit him down and say that, they actively worked with him in order to write the book. Also, by my calculation, that is $102 per book that he's being paid. How much does this book retail for? So what is going on here in terms of the amount of money that he's being paid for a vastly underperforming multi-million-dollar book deal? I think there's a lot that's fishy both on that, but also even within his staff in terms of suppressing some of the true numbers specifically in order to help the book and the governor's own career.
Well, I think that's the key issue here. The things that we know, right, are the fact that he moved 9,000 COVID positive patients into nursing homes, resulting in 15,000 deaths, that his staff probably helped him write this book, that he used state resources to do it, and that his staff also covered up sort of the true nature of what happened in those nursing homes. So I think ultimately, if you're going to write a book about how well you did with all of that going on, you should probably donate that $5 million advance to the state's COVID relief fund, because I think that's the situation that we're living in right now. Mm-hmm. But it kind of just goes to show you, I think Roger's completely right. You never want to get ahead of yourself like this. But in politics, sometimes you fail up. And I think this is the case with Andrew Cuomo. He's not really suffering any consequences. This is the same with Rachel Levine, the Secretary of Health from Pennsylvania, who just did the same thing Cuomo did, put COVID positive patients in a nursing home, resulting in thousands of deaths. She is now the number 2 at HHS, confirmed by the Senate. So there is no accountability for this in politics, which I think is pretty sad.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, speak to that point, because on the one hand, I think some of the fire around Cuomo has kind of calmed down. That was exactly what he was hoping for, is that time would pass and people would basically move on. And I think there's some indication that's exactly what is happening, although we don't know for sure. But This is a guy who has, since like the day he was born, wanted to be president of the United States. And I think those further pathways forward have been very much closed off by all of this.
Yeah, you would think it's very interesting when he hit the turbulent seas around his handling of the nursing homes and things like that, which Rachel very aptly points out. You would think, like, normally in a communications context, people are like, we've got to get out a statement and we've got to respond. And that's a proper course of action and a good way to think. But sometimes you can just say, something else will come along. And something else will come along and chew up the media oxygen, and the glare will go somewhere else, and something will happen somewhere. And within 48 or 72 hours, the focus will be on some other situation. What you don't want to do is make yourself that other situation and proactively pop your head above the trees and do something like this that says, look at me, put me under a microscope again. It's just tremendously unwise, and it kicks up all this dust around this. So I don't know why he would do this when he was getting 3, 4, 6 months, past the nursing home stories. And now, as we're seeing in this conversation, it just brings all that stuff back up and gives it another lap around the track.
Yeah, and Rachel, I think the media story really can't be ignored here, because not only was he really just given a license to do whatever he wanted by his brother and by many of the major networks, but even now, I mean, just yesterday, he made some outrageous comments around sexual harassment. He's like, I'm feeling uncomfortable and all of this. And look, I think I saw it rate slightly in terms of Twitter, and I don't think a single major news outlet even covered it. And if they did, it was probably Fox News. It's just amazing that you can get away with this type of thing.
It is, and that's the story of Andrew Cuomo. I think it's so little accountability on so many levels, not just within the government apparatus itself, but also within media that intentionally maybe missed. I hate to put intent behind it, but you have to think there wasn't any sort of investigation going on, just, intense sycophancy, really, and praise of Andrew Cuomo's work and no one really giving it a second look, which is what our media is designed to do. And so I think there's just failure after failure after failure here to hold someone accountable for things that were really egregious, not just in sort of how he handled himself as governor, but how he handled COVID-19. Yeah. And again, I'm distressed in the sense that I keep seeing these people fail up. But that's the story of Washington in many ways, I suppose.
That's right. Oh, what are you surprised by? You've lived here for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's true.
Stick with us, guys. We'll be right back with Team Rising.